Top 50 ASP. Net MVC interview questions and answers to prepare your interview within 30 minutes. 1. What is MVC? Model View Controller. Model View Controller, MVC, is a software architectural pattern for implementing user interfaces. It divides a given software application into 3 interconnected parts to separate the internal representation of information from the way that information is presented to or accepted by the user. 2. Can you explain model, controller, and view in MVC? Model is a business entity and it is used to represent the application data. Controller request sent by the user always scatters through controller and its responsibility is to redirect to the specific view using view method. View is the presentation layer of MVC. 3. Explain in which assemblies the MVC framework is defined. The MVC framework is defined in system.web.mvc. 4. What is Razor in MVC? ASP. Net MVC has always supported the concept of view engines, which are the pluggable modules, which practically implement different template syntax options. The default view engine for ASP, Net MVC uses the same asp/.asp/master file templates as ASP, Net Web Forms. Other popular ASP, Net MVC view engines are Spark and Ham. 5. List out few different return types of controller action method. View result, JavaScript result, redirect result, Json result, content result. 6. Can you explain the page lifecycle of MVC? Below are the process followed in the sequence dash. App initialization, routing, instantiate and execute controller, locate and invoke controller action, instantiate and render view. 7. Mention what is the difference between adding routes to a web form application and an MVC application. To add routes to a web form application, we can use map page route method of the route collection class. Where adding routes to an MVC application, you can use map route method. 8. Explain attribute-based routing in MVC. In ASP, Net MVC 5.0, we have a new attribute route. By using the route attribute, we can define the URL structure. For example, in the below code, we have decorated the GoToAbout action with the route attribute. The route attribute says that the GoToAbout can be invoked using the URL structure users about. 9. What is temp data in MVC? Temp data is a dictionary object to store data temporarily. It is a temp data dictionary class type and instance property of the controller base class. Temp data can keep data for the duration of an HTTP request. In other words, it can keep live data between 2 consecutive HTTP requests. It will help us to pass the state between action methods. Temp data only works with the current and subsequent request. Temp data uses a session variable to store the data. Temp data requires typecasting when used to retrieve data. 10. What are the advantages of MVC over ASP? Net provides a clean separation of concerns among UI, presentation layer, model, transfer objects, domain objects, entities, and business logic, controller. Easy to unit test. Improved reusability of model and views. We can have multiple views which can point to the same model and vice versa. Improved structuring of the code. 11. Mention what are the 2 ways to add constraints to a route. The 2 methods to add constraints to a route is: use regular expressions. Use an object that implements our constraint interface. 12. What basic folders do we have in an ASP? Net project without areas. What are they for? What subfolders do they have, if applicable? Which folders are publicly accessible? App_data can be used to store some application's data. App_start contains configuration classes, root config, bundle config, etc. Content is a publicly accessible folder for static files, such as CSS files, images, etc., but not scripts. Controllers is a default folder for application controllers. Scripts is a publicly accessible folder for JavaScript files. Views. The folder contains a folder for every controller, plus a special folder shared for views used by multiple views controllers. For example, if we have a controller called Home Controller, we will have a Home subfolder here with all the views related to Home Controller. 13. What are the advantages of using ILC containers in an application? The main advantages are: the lifetime of every object can be managed externally. Objects are not responsible for creating services and providing dependencies. Changes to a dependency list won't affect an object using the service. The same instance can be shared by several unrelated consumers. Services provide contracts, so implementation can be changed in the future. 14. What is separation of concerns in ASP? Net MVC? It is the process of breaking the program into various distinct features which overlaps in functionality as little as possible. MVC pattern concerns on separating the content from presentation and data processing from content. 15. Mention what is the advantages of MVC? A main advantage of MVC is separation of concern. Separation of concern means we divide the application model, control, and view. We can easily maintain our application because of separation of concern. In the same time, we can split many developers' work at a time. It will not affect one developer work to another developer work. It supports TDD, test-driven development. We can create an application with unit tests. We can write one test case. Latest version of MVC support default responsive website and mobile templates. A main advantage of MVC is separation of concern. Separation of concern means we divide the application model, control, and view. We can easily maintain our application because of separation of concern. In the same time, we can split many developers' work at a time. It will not affect one developer work to another developer work. It supports TDD, test-driven development. We can create an application with unit tests. We can write one test case. Latest version of MVC support default responsive website and mobile templates. 16. What is partial view in MVC? A partial view is a chunk of HTML that can be safely inserted into an existing DOM. Most commonly, partial views are used to componentize Razor views and make them easier to build and update. Partial views can also be returned directly from controller methods. In this case, the browser still receives text, HTML content, but not necessarily HTML content that makes up an entire page. As a result, if a URL that returns a partial view is directly invoked from the address bar of a browser, an incomplete page may be displayed. This may be something like a page that misses title, script, and style sheets. 17. List out different return types of a controller action method. There are a total 9 return types we can use to return results from controller to view. View result. View. This return type is used to return a web page from an action method. Partial view result. Partial view. This return type is used to send a part of a view which will be rendered in another view. Redirect result. Redirect. This return type is used to redirect to any other controller and action method depending on the URL. Redirect to root result. Redirect to action. Redirect to root. This return type is used when we want to redirect to any other action method. Content result. Content. This return type is used to return HTTP content type like text, plain as the result of the action. JSON result. JSON. This return type is used when we want to return a JSON message. JavaScript result. JavaScript. This return type is used to return JavaScript code that will run in browser. File result. File. This return type is used to send binary output and response. Empty result. This return type is used to return nothing. Void in the result. 18. Mention what before filter, before render, and after filter functions do in controller. Before filter. This function is run before every action in the controller. It's the right place to check for an active session or inspect user permissions. Before render. This function is called after controller action logic, but before the view is rendered. This function is not often used, but may be required if you are calling render manually before the end of a given action. After filter. This function is called after every controller action, and after rendering is done. It is the last controller method to run. 19. What is the meaning of unobtrusive JavaScript? This is a general term that conveys a general philosophy similar to the term REST, representational state transfer. Unobtrusive JavaScript doesn't intermix JavaScript code on your page markup. E.g., instead of using events like onClicked.submit, the unobtrusive JavaScript attaches to elements by their ID or class based on the HTML5 data attributes. 20. Mention what is the difference between view data and view bag. In ASP Net MVC, there are three ways to pass stored data between the controllers and views. View data. 1. View data is used to pass data from a controller to view. 2. It is derived from view data dictionary class. 3. It is available for the current request only. 4. Requires typecasting for complex data type and checks for null values to avoid error. 5. If redirection occurs, then its value becomes null. View bag. 1. View bag is also used to pass data from the controller to the respective view. 2. View bag is a dynamic property that takes advantage of the new dynamic features in C number 4.0. 3. It is also available for the current request only. 4. If redirection occurs, then its value becomes null. 5. Doesn't require typecasting for the complex data type. 21. What are filters in MVC? In MVC, many times we would like to perform some action before or after a particular operation. For achieving this functionality, ASP Net MVC provides feature to add pre- and post-action behaviors on controllers' action methods. 22. Explain the role of components presentation, abstraction, and control in MVC. Presentation. It is the visual representation of a specific abstraction within the application. Abstraction. It is the business domain functionality within the application. Control. It is a component that keeps consistency between the abstraction within the system and their presentation to the user in addition to communicating with other controls within the system. 23. What are action filters in MVC? Action filters are additional attributes that can be applied to either a controller section or the entire controller to modify the way in which action is executed. These attributes are special. Net class is derived from system.attribute, which can be attached to classes, methods, properties, and fields. ASP Net MVC provides the following action filters. Output cache. This action filter caches the output of a controller action for a specified amount of time. Handle error. This action filter handles errors raised when a controller action executes. Authorize. This action filter enables you to restrict access to a particular user or role. Now we will see the code example to apply these filters on an example controller. Action filter demo controller. Action filter demo controller is just used as an example. You can use these filters on any of your controllers. 24. Explain what is routing. What are the three segments for routing is important. Routing helps you to decide a URL structure and map the URL with the controller. The three segments that are important for routing is controller name, action method name, parameter. 25. What is attribute routing in MVC? ASP. Net Web API supports this type routing. This is introduced in MVC 5. In this type of routing, attributes are being used to define the routes. This type of routing gives more control over class query routing. Attribute routing can be defined at controller level or at action level like dash. Route action equals test category list, controller level. Route customers / test category ident min 10, action level. 26. Explain JSON binding. JavaScript object notation, JSON. Binding support started from MVC 3 onwards via the new JSON value provider factory, which allows the action methods to accept and model bind data in JSON format. This is useful in AJAX scenarios like client templates and data binding that need to post data back to the server. 27. Explain what are the steps for the execution of an MVC project. The steps for the execution of an MVC project includes receive first request for the application, performs routing, creates MVC request handler, create controller, execute controller, invoke action, execute result. 28. Mention how can maintain session in MVC. Session can be maintained in MVC by three ways: temp data, view data, and view bag. 29. Mention what is the difference between action result and view result. Action result is an abstract class, while view result is derived from abstract result class. Action result has a number of derived classes like JSON result, file stream result, and view result. Action result is best if you are deriving different types of view dynamically. 30. Explain bundle.config in MVC. Bundle config.cs in MVC4 is used to register the bundles by the bundling and minification system. Many bundles are added by default, including jQuery libraries like jQuery.validate, Modernism, and default CSS references. 31. 24 mention what is the difference between action result and view result. Action result is an abstract class, while view result is derived from abstract result class. Action result has a number of derived classes like JSON result, file stream result, and view result. Action result is best if you are deriving different types of view dynamically. 32. Explain how you can send the result back in JSON format in MVC. In order to send the result back in JSON format in MVC, you can use JSON result class. 33. List out the types of result in MVC. In MVC, there are 12 types of results in MVC, where action result class is the main class, while the 11 are their subtypes. View result, partial view result, empty result, redirect result, redirect to root result, JSON result, JavaScript result, content result, file content result, file stream result, file path result. 34. Explain temp data in MVC. Temp data is again a key value pair as view data. This is derived from temp data dictionary class. Temp data is used when the data is to be used in two consecutive requests. This could be between the actions or between the controllers. This requires typecasting in view. 35. What are HTML helpers in MVC? HTML helpers are like controls in traditional web forms. But HTML helpers are more lightweight compared to web controls, as it does not hold view state and events. HTML helpers returns the HTML string, which can be directly rendered to HTML page. Custom HTML helpers also can be created by overriding HTML helper class. 36. What are HTML helpers in MVC? With MVC, HTML helpers are much like traditional ASP. Net web form controls. Just like web form controls in ASP. Net HTML helpers are used to modifying HTML. But HTML helpers are more lightweight, unlike web form controls. An HTML helper does not have an event model and a view state. HTML helpers are mostly methods that return string values. It is not mandatory to use HTML helper classes for building an ASP. Net MVC application, as users can build an ASP. Net MVC application without using them. But HTML helpers do help in the rapid development of a view. 37. How to implement forms authentication in MVC. ASP. Net forms authentication occurs after REA's authentication is completed. You can configure forms authentication by using forms element within web.config file of your application. The default attribute values for forms authentication are shown below. System.web. Authentication mode equals forms. Forms login URL equals login.asks protection equals all timeout equals 30 name equals asp set path equals require wrestle equals false sliding expiration equals true default URL equals default.asks cookie ELS equals use device profile enable cross app redirects equals false / authentication / system.web. The forms authentication class creates the authentication cookie automatically when set auth cookie or redirect from login page methods are called. The value of authentication cookie contains a string representation of the encrypted and signed forms authentication ticket object. 38. Mention the order of the filters that get executed if the multiple filters are implemented. The filter order would be like authorization filters, action filters, response filters, exception filters. 39. What are AJAX helpers in MVC? AJAX helpers are used to create AJAX-enabled elements like as AJAX-enabled forms and links, which performs the request asynchronously, and these are extension methods of a JAX helper class which exists in namespace system.web.mvc. 40. Mention what filters are executed in the end. In the end, exception filters are executed. 41. What are the benefits of area in MVC? Areas are just a way to divide or isolate the modules. Benefits of area in MVC. 1. Allows us to organize models, views, and controllers into separate functional sections of the application, such as administration, billing, customer support, and much more. 2. Easy to integrate with other areas created by another. 3. Easy for unit testing. 42. Mention what are the file extensions for Razor views. For Razor views, the file extensions are CSHTML if C# is the programming language. VBHTML if VB is the programming language. 43. Can you explain render body and render page in MVC? Render body is like content placeholder in web forms. This will exist in layout page and it will render the child pages, views. Layout page will have only one render body method. Render page also exists in layout page and multiple render page can be there in layout page. 44. Explain the concept of MVC scaffolding. ASP. Net Scaffolding is the code generation framework for ASP. Net Web Applications. Visual Studio 2013 includes pre-installed code generators for MVC and Web API projects. You add scaffolding to your project when you want to quickly add code that interacts with data models. Using scaffolding can reduce the amount of time to develop standard data operations in your project. Scaffolding consists of page templates, entity page templates, field page templates, and filter templates. These templates are called scaffold templates and allow you to quickly build a functional data-driven website. 45. Mention what are the two ways for adding constraints to a route. Two methods for adding constraints to route is using regular expressions, using an object that implements desired constraint interface. 46. What are the subtypes of action result? Action result is used to represent the action method result. Below are the subtypes of action result dash. View result, partial view result, redirect to root result, redirect result, JavaScript result, Json result, file result, status code result. 47. Mention what are the two ways for adding constraints to a route. Two methods for adding constraints to route is using regular expressions, using an object that implements desired constraint interface. 48. What is output caching in MVC? The main objective of making use of output caching is to dramatically improve the performance of an ASP Net Mvc application. It enables us to cache the content returned by any controller method so that the same content does not need to be generated each time the same controller method is invoked. Output caching has huge advantages, such as it reduces server round trips, reduces database server round trips, reduces network traffic, etc. 49. What is the use of keep and peek and temp data? Once temp data is read in the current request, it's not available in the subsequent request. If we want temp data to be read and also available in the subsequent request, then after reading we need to call keep method as shown in the code below. Add temp data my data. Temp data dot keep my data. The more shortcut way of achieving the same is by using keep. This function helps to read as well advises MVC to maintain temp data for the subsequent request. String str equals temp data dot keep my data to string. 50. Why to use HTML dot partial in MVC? This method is used to render the specified partial view as an HTML string. This method does not depend on any action methods. We can use this like below dash. At HTML dot partial